Now, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to welcome you to the last session of the day. Hello? Hello? Good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. Can we start the session, please? Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for staying for this last session, which is going to be looking at the role of sustainable agricultural mechanization in scaling up the adoption of conservation agriculture in Africa. This is a session where we are going to hear from experts who are in the research, development, finance, and extension with respect to conservation agriculture and climate smart agriculture. My name is Louis Owe, and I'm the resilience team leader for FAO in Southern Africa. I'm today representing the Assistant Director General of FAO, who is also the representative for Africa, Dr. Abebe Haile Gabriel. He could not be with us today, so I'm stepping in his place to moderate this session. And I'm pleased to have these speakers who are going to share with us their experiences, their visions, their views on many of the issues that are, to some extent, preventing the adoption of conservation agriculture in Africa. I don't know whether it's by coincidence or not that the African continent has got, we had the statistics this morning on the adoption of conservation agriculture in Africa. And the same continent has the lowest level of mechanization. The same continent has the lowest adoption of conservation, especially by the smallholder farmers, despite the fact that there are so many benefits that have been shown, scientifically proven about conservation agriculture, but still the adoption is low. The Assistant Director General, the Deputy Director General of FAO, Beth Bechtel, this morning spoke about the drudgery of farming for women in Africa and the intention of FAO and other partners to try and reduce that. And mechanization is one of the ways of doing that. We are going to be listening to presentations that are going to touch on how all these organizations that are involved in climate smart agriculture, conservation agriculture, are putting efforts to try and address the low adoption rates of conservation agriculture. And sustainable mechanization is one of them. The key word is sustainable agriculture mechanization. It's not just mechanization. We're talking about sustainable agriculture mechanization. It is a critical element of the adoption of the three principles of conservation agriculture as we know them. Reduced or minimum tillage, mixing and rotating crops, and maintaining cover. When you want to implement those practices, you would need mechanization to assist you. The other parts of the world where these principles are being applied are highly mechanized. In Africa, we are not. So let's hear from the speakers. We'll start first with the Director General of the Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, commonly known as CIMIT. He's going to make his presentation. After his presentation, we're going to have 6 other presentations by experts in the area of different areas: finance, agriculture engineering, agriculture development. They will share with us their experiences and try to give us something for us to discuss. Then we have a conversation. We have you as the audience asking them questions, interacting with them. We want to give more time to that interaction with you so that at the end of the day, we can try to identify what are those key actions that we need to take going forward, all of us, in terms of sustainable mechanization, agricultural mechanization in Africa. What do we need to do? And where are those low-hanging fruits? What are those actions, and who is supposed to do what to make sure that we have sustainable agricultural mechanization in Africa? So without wasting any more time, I would like to call Dr. Bram Govers, the Director General of CIMMYT, to come and make his presentation. Over to you, Dr.
All right, good evening, all of you, and it's great to be back here and see some familiar faces. More and more we know that conservation agriculture is not only about yield, but also about resilience, and you're proving this today after already a day of speeches and talks and PowerPoints. This is the last session, we're almost there, so we'll try to do it as dynamic as we can. So first and foremost, CIMMYT. Many of you know CIMMYT for a while, and you know that CIMMYT is mainly known for its maize and wheat varieties globally, many of them planted by several of the farmers that also here in the room. But CIMMYT is more than only those maize and wheat varieties. And in our 2100 vision, which is a vision where we try to say, if we want a better world in 2100, how would that look like? And when we first said that, many said 2100, too far away. But those of you that have small kids or nephews or friends with kids that are younger than 10 years, there's a high probability that those kids will still be alive in 2100. So it's not that far away. And so CIMMYT's vision is that we want to be a global thought leader and change agent for climate resilient, sustainable and inclusive agricultural development for a food and nutrition secure future. And I'm very happy that the conservation agriculture team, the agronomy team, the systems team in CIMMYT understood this and made us a part of thought leadership together with FAO, and shout out to the leadership of the FAO colleagues there. Good to see you again. Here also on the conservation agriculture stage. It's not only about yield, if you read it the other way around, it's about food and nutrition security amidst the climate crisis. So we designed a 2030 strategy, and you all will have heard about the 1CGIAR. So what does that mean? It means that strategy is embedded in that 1CGIAR strategy. It's a strategy that was developed inclusively and participatory, and it's trying to look at how can we transform agriculture, but also improve lives. Together with the strategy, there's a bit of a new logo. Those that know institutions have a history. Institutions outlive individuals. And CIMMYT as an institution had a very clear logo with maize and wheat at the front. You win a prize if you tell me after this presentation who was the designer of this logo, because he did many other interesting designs and actually won prizes for it. So when we said we're going to change the CIMMYT logo, you can imagine what the uproar was in the organization. So what we decided to do is to say we have a stable basis. We are still about maize and wheat. But we need to be about more than that if we want to be about sustainable, resilient maize and wheat. So at the end of CIMMYT, we added an extra visual element. And you can recognize this as soil, plant, and water. You can also recognize this as those other crops that we need to include to do the diversification of the systems, those opportunity crops or crops that can diversify our maize and wheat systems. Sometimes it can mean, or many times it can mean, less wheat and less maize if you look at the system in order to make that maize and wheat productive for the future. It's also about the nexus in energy, water, and food. And if you were listening to the last panel, that's what it really was about. The job sits in the nexus of energy, water, and food. It's also a bit of a swirl that wants to represent that we need to inject systems thinking, This is not about linear delivery. This is not about linear scaling. You as a conservation agriculture, regenerative agricultural experts know that this is about a systems approach where everything depends in order to come to the same outcomes. So our 5 strategic objectives for that CIMMYT strategy. The first one is to be a better partner. And I want to invite you to tell us what we need to do to be a better partner for this conservation agriculture community. What can we do better? What can we do different in order to have the impact we achieve? Our second strategic objective is about the innovations we do, the new seeds, the new agronomy practices, the new insights. The third strategic objective wants to provoke improved livelihood trajectories. And I do want to stop for a moment at the livelihood trajectories. This is not about measuring the impact of what we do on the livelihoods only today. It's about designing the trajectory for a farm family so that they can move forward and actually take their whole family throughout the trajectory towards towards a healthy livelihood. It's not the same to have 2 kids that need to go to school than wanting to send them to university. It's not the same of having elderly parents that need care, etc., etc. So everything we do to underpin the farm families needs to foresee in the livelihood trajectory, not just measure the impact on the livelihood today. The next objective is we need to do that within resilient and sustainable agri-food systems as a boundary condition. And last but not least, every information we design needs to be put better to use for those that make decisions. Be it the farmer and she that needs to make a decision on how to apply better fertilizer in a conservation agriculture system, or be it all the way up to the Pentagon or national security experts to say how does conservation agriculture influence resilience of entire countries, entire regions. So with that, we identified our hills and mountains. And one of the big hills and mountains identified to achieve those strategic objectives is better data systematic insights. And I think you will hear a little bit about that in the panel here. I already could see a difference during the day today. Very data-dense North American continent, not such a data-dense African continent. How can we change that? How can we source and make sure that we have data-rich environments everywhere and that data richness doesn't become an exclusion parameter factor per se? Something for this community to think about. So CIMMYT today is operational in over 80 countries, and of course we will be focusing with you on the African continent during the panel. You all know that CIMMYT safeguards the biodiversity of maize and wheat. You can see a sample of that, 28,000 different maize samples, 140,000 different wheats that are turned into new varieties that we scale to the farmers. Every year that means sending to the blue dots and the red dots those new maize and wheat varieties that can respond to the different needs. And one of the big challenges is how do we make those varieties better suitable for those diversified regenerative agricultural systems. But varieties, as you well know in this community, on its own is not enough. We need to turn agriculture from the problem into the solution. And this is a picture where you can see a long-term trial where on the left-hand side, same variety as on the right-hand side, with the difference, the left-hand side is 6 tons maize per hectare, right-hand side less than a ton, but especially a big difference in between the right-hand side, I mean, depends how the right-hand side, yes, emits CO2, and the left side, while it generates higher yield, also sequesters or on total budget is a carbon negative. And this was calculated over many, many years. So if you look at the discussion and look over a longer time, in a long-term trial that I had the honor to start my career, so I'm reconnecting to this community a little bit. This is where I did this is a picture from my thesis research. I was a very happy man when I could do that, and now unfortunately I can just every once in a while, 3 times a year, walk through those plots, and you luckily can still work in them. So if you look at that left side, regenerative or conservation agriculture, right side, conventional tillage, 2009, drought, dramatic impact. And I would always say, does it always look like that? No, it depends. Choose your pictures wisely. If it is a dry year, this is how the difference between conservation agriculture and conventional looks. Unfortunately, I had to change some of those statements over the past year because it took a while, and all of a sudden 2020, very similar picture. Not long after that, 2 years later, very similar picture. So we see that those adverse conditions are actually coming faster and faster. So climate change is catching up in that area of the world, which is a rain-fed, of course, a rain-fed system. If we then look at another system or research here, very interesting to the left side. So the first 3 bars are basically conventional systems. The 4 last treatments are types of conservation agriculture with different residue incorporation. And of course, we can see more carbon in the soil. But if you also look at the graph that you can see over here on the top, that doesn't work, but the graph you see first several years, the green dots are conservation agriculture based practices, the blue ones conventional tillage based. You can see an interruption, and then you can see that the two separate. Why are they separate? In between, there was no money to maintain the long-term trials, so there was the trials were maintained, but harvest wasn't measured, soils weren't measured. So a key message, this is painful to see on the slide. So those of you that give the check, don't make us go through this pain. It looks very ugly. So we need to maintain those long-term trials over time. Now, we did maintain, but yields weren't measured, soil wasn't measured. And when it was restarted and measurements restarted, there was actually a better hybrid introduced. And you can actually see how those conservation agriculture practices respond very well to those now new improved varieties, while the conventional practices basically don't extract the potential of those varieties out of that. So I think that's a very interesting systems perspective to say, if you, the breeders, if the seed companies want to see the investment work, there is something to argue about the conservation agriculture practices per se. Now, having those long-term trials on its own is not enough. You need to get them out there with the farmers. And I do remember 15 years ago, we were talking about innovation systems, innovation hubs, make it all work together. How does that look like? But especially today, I think, we need to discuss, how does that then look like for our research? We have our fixed long-term trials. We have our red dots, our 40,000 different plots. This is an example from Mexico. We have examples from Africa. Christian is in the room, so I'm not going to present that. He can present that. We have colleagues from South Asia. So if we have those red dots, how do they connect with those long-term trials? Those red dots are 20,000, 40,000 farms where we have measured the impact of conservation agriculture on the ground. Now, how do you extract from that knowledge to define what is regenerative agriculture? Because the speaker this morning was very clear, conservation agriculture very clearly defined. How do we now go to decision-making, taking to regenerative act towards a more outcome, impact-driven decision-making rather than a mechanistic decision-making process? Is there something in all those data spots that at the same time overcomes scaling, promotes conservation agriculture, but can generate data for better decision-making and taking? Don't forget that making a decision is not the same as taking a decision. I can make many decisions, but in order to actually execute them, I need to do more than just be ready to do the decision. Same for a farmer. Financial capital, inclusion, having actually the power to execute on the decision you take. So also multiple dimensions in the system of the social construct around implementation of conservation agriculture needs to be taken into account. One of those other drivers is, of course, the market. And so by actually visualizing the power of the data of those farmers, we could connect with multiple companies that would otherwise buy their grain for their products outside of the country and would buy it in the US, ship it in. While today with the data, as they want to respond to consumer demands, something I heard from the farmers, with those data, farmers can take better decisions, but if we visualize them to consumers, they can also take different decisions. Or if we visualize it to business continuities for those companies, it becomes actually interesting to buy from those farmers. Now, those smallholder farmers, it is more expensive for the company to buy from them. It is easier to ship a ship from a homogeneous hybrid from some high productive area. Cheaper as in buying, more costly as towards business continuity insurance or business continuity as aspects. So we need to visualize and put a cost on all those different aspects to make this an interesting business value proposition. So I'm just giving you those examples to see what could be the equivalent for this, for decision making on the African continent, because the panelists will give live expert action and responses to that. Several of the things measured. Yes, we increase carbon sequestration or we reduce the CO2 footprint is probably a better way to express, to get out of the discussion, is it sequestration or not? The full budget is what we need to look at. Of course, water and water reduction is an important element. Water savings is an important element to report, and we are reporting towards those companies and towards those consumers. Similar example from the Punjab, where we transitioned to the left and to the right from a traditional system with residue burning towards two options for conservation agriculture. In the both options, we see water reduction in use in a very heavily irrigated system and reduction of the carbon footprint in those systems, together with many other environmental elements. Mechanization per se can be a driver for some of that transformation in the rural communities. So if we are going to discuss mechanization, we should not discuss it just to do conservation agriculture. And to be frank and to share, one of my learnings when I did machinery for conservation agriculture, I was really looking at the discs to plant the seed in conservation agriculture as a hurdle to overcome. Today, the team is way smarter and is looking at mechanization as a driver to really transform communities, to give them access to some of those data-driven markets, to actually have more energy to make water available that can be used in the irrigated systems, or to actually do also the harvest with the same machine. So it's a way more self-encompassing vision about what a machine should do or what mechanization should do as a driver for transformation in rural communities. So how do we approach that mechanization effort? On the one hand, it's looking at existing machines and can we turn them into conservation agriculture machines. But it's also about, can we set up a complete mechanization effort that looks at the entire system and the need of energy and mechanization in that system per se. And of course, can we provide and develop the conducive market around it to make sure that the machines get there. But of course, and in order to do that, it's not just looking at planting, it is looking at positively influencing the entire effect of mechanization on labor, on inputs, on timeliness, and on empowerment of these communities. And you see a few very interesting graphs there, right? So look with me before and after. So you have a before and after mechanization in a village. Not going to go into the details of the research, but if we quickly go through it, so childcare activities could increase as mechanization was done in the right way in those communities. Cooking for hired farm laborers went down. We also need to look at what's then the impact for those farm laborers and where are they going to get their work and their income, of course. Before and after, livestock and poultry income-generating activities could go up. Harvesting, carrying, trashing, what the investment in labor went down. Help to manage farm laborers, the time invested went down. Time to spend on leisure actually went up. Other income-generating activities went up, and time to sleep went up. So I definitely need to mechanize some of my activities. With that, it's not always about the planting. If we look at the South Asian situation, the biggest impact came when we understood that laser leveling was actually what was holding back the adoption piece. So it's about identifying, and this is not a new story, as you know, it's about identifying that piece that needs working on, and then how can mechanization actually help to make that happen. So that brings us to, if we want to scale that agricultural mechanization, we need to scan really what is avoiding that mechanization from happening. And it's not always having the right machine. Yeah, so the best innovation, the innovation that makes most sense, is not always, or is actually rarely, the one that is most scalable. It's not the most perfect rational tool that is going to be the one that is going to be most ready to scale. So CIMMYT developed in cooperation with several of you actually here in the room, and I do want to recognize our friend also here from the FAO on the mechanization part and the mechanization thinking as a tool to implement the conservation agriculture. This is a team effort. So we identified a scan of 10 points that you need to go through if you want to look at what is the scalable solution to activate in a certain community. And so you can see this here online. And also call once again to us that want to generate the data. We should go beyond just measuring number of farmers reached. I hope that that graph that was presented at the beginning of the conference, which is very impressive, and you see conservation agriculture going up, hopefully we can make that more and more sophisticated as understanding is what else is going up or down, or how is actually the complexity around those numbers to come to better understanding. And I know it's not an easy thing to do, it has a complexity. So understanding the mechanization in that perspective of the scaling effort is yes about the technology, but it is as much about the business environment around it, the market that drives it, and many, many other policy factors. So smart mechanization, side note, is and could also be an impressive way to do digitalization or data generation. There's a wealth of those machines see a lot. They're rarely connected to data systems. So imagine that we could put sensors in all those machines running over the African continent, and that could be sourced. That would be a great way to actually underpin decision making. So how can we make that happen? Probably the cost of it is not at this point justifiable unless we can turn that cost into benefit equally towards market access, towards data-driven decision making. So last but not least, what is then the right model to provide some of that mechanization? It is not a tractor per farmer. It needs to be also a generator of a business environment within those communities. So looking at different way actually to do machinery provision models. And a very interesting thing, of course, that CIMMYT can do is to look at last mile provider models across the world. So we compared what has been tried in Africa, what has been tried in Latin America, what has been tried in South Asia. And it depends. The business environment is not the same in each of those countries, continents. So what is a driver in one is not necessarily working in the other one. One may be immediate cash or capital may be valued higher, and in another environment your risk mitigation may be valued higher. So both are actually risk systems, but one gives more value to the insurance piece and the other one gives more value to the immediate availability of cash. So how do you work with those different business environments is extremely important. And if you then run this together with the scaling scan, together with the data piece, together with the long-term trials that give you the information, you can see that we are getting somewhere. So I did want to send you home with one key takeaway message, and I don't think it's new, but it's really that realization that you need a systems perspective to really catalyze positive rural transformation. And yes, it is about leveraging yield-enhancing practices. Yield should not be an ugly word. It is still about productivity, but it is more than that. At what cost? At what resilience of that yield in the future? Are we ready to sacrifice some yield for a continuous total yield over time? But it needs especially to go through entrepreneurship skills and market participation. People want to take decisions, want to design their own future, and that may have a higher value than the maximum yield out of a very standardized recommendation. So sustainable, and through that, sustainable mechanization can be that piece of taking your decisions in your own hand and actioning them on the field, to transform data into information, information in decision making, and the machine, the mechanization can become the tool to do the decision taking, deactivating it on the ground. And that is what generates entrepreneurship. That is what generates people wanting to invest extra time, energy, etc., because you're taking your future very practically in your own hands. So therefore, as a result, we need to promote more inclusive and sustainable agricultural systems that benefit farmers and communities globally. And with that, I want to give more time to the panelists, so I'm going to give back 1 minute so you all have a few seconds extra. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Govers, for that excellent presentation. I think I'm not going to do justice if I try to summarize. But the long and short of it, I think you have highlighted the importance of systems approach. It's not just about the technology, it's about business models that are relevant. It's about market participation. It's about inclusive and sustainable agri-food systems. And mechanization can help us achieve that. Thank you very much once again. I'm going to call the next speaker, who spoke earlier today, but now talking specifically about mechanization. Engineer Said Mkoma, who is the Executive Director of the African Conservation Tillage Network, and he is going to just give us a bit of background to what mechanization agenda has been in Africa and what ACT and other stakeholders see in taking some, that is sustainable agriculture mechanization, forward. Over to you, Said.
Thank you very much, moderator, Dr. Lewis Hove. I will be very brief in talking about the role of sustainable agricultural mechanization in scaling the adoption of conservation agriculture in Africa. By describing some of the key opportunities that exist in Africa, but also highlighting the gaps, the challenges that must be addressed to benefit from those opportunities. A little bit about the FSAMA, the Framework for Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization, and lastly, on some of the actions that have been taken, particularly establishment of a committee of the directors of agricultural mechanization and engineering services in the continent. So the opportunity for farming in Africa is huge. One, because Africa's population is urbanizing. We are told it will increase by 250 million people by 2030. And the urban population will depend on food produced in the continent. And this is a huge market for the farmers. But also there is the other side that we are still importing a lot of food, and import substitution is another opportunity. There is also the element that 60% of the uncultivated land globally is in Africa, which means we need to harness the opportunity. But lastly, we are reminded that Africa is the youngest continent, with 60% are under 35 years. And we were also told 72% of these have access to digital tools. However, there are challenges. There is a gap before we can harness these opportunities. One is that the average age of the farmer, except for those in horticulture, is 60 years. Farming is largely left to women and the old who cannot immigrate to cities. However, the youths do not hate farming. They only hate the arduousness, the poverty inherent with the hand-hoe farming. So the issue is, do we have the technologies, innovations that can remove the risk in the hand-hoe-based farming and turn it into an opportunity? How do we add value? How do we increase shelf life to the farmers' produce so that they do not give away their hard-earned produce by selling it raw, by selling it unprocessed, and by selling it at the lowest ebb of the production season simply because they don't have storage opportunities? Do we have the technologies, innovations, and practices that can induce climate change resilience, can increase productivity, profitability, shelf life, and competitiveness? The answer is yes. However, the answer is not in conservation agriculture alone, neither is it in mechanization alone. It is in the combination of conservation agriculture with sustainable agricultural mechanization. So with that, the African Union Commission with FAO developed the framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization, which was launched in 2018 in Rome. It has 10 elements, and all I can say, this is the guideline to scaling sustainable agricultural mechanization in the continent. But another effort that has been going on is bringing together the directors of mechanization across the continent, bringing together the countries to work together, break silos, and see how they could share best practices, innovations. And this was done with the support of the AUC and ACT and FAO, forming a network of the directors. I'm glad to say the vice president of this network, Director Andrea Madi Rondomarala, is with us today. And the committee has developed some tools, some frameworks, action programs, hopefully to be finalized through the next session. Finally, just to say, courtesy of the Food and Agriculture Organization, we have 300 copies of this framework document. Courtesy of CIMIT, these books are available in the CIMIT booth. I think there's still a few copies remaining. For those who can wish to get a copy, they can get it there, complimentary of FAO. Thank you very much. Enjoy the plenary session.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Engineer Mukoma, for that brief overview of what the AU, the ACT, FAO are doing in terms of, and other partners are doing in terms of summer. I would like now to move on to the next speaker, who is on the program. We're supposed to be having Her Excellency Madam Sako, who is the Commissioner for Agriculture and Rural Development at the African Union Commission. She could not be with us, but we are fortunate to have Dr. Jerome, who is going to take her place. He is the special advisor to the Commissioner, and he's going to make the presentation on behalf of the Commissioner. Over to you, Dr. Jerome.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed. First of all, felicitations from Ambassador Joseph Asako, who very much wanted to be with us today because of the interest in the topic. Unfortunately, she could not make it because the midterm AU summit is on in Ghana. She had to release me to come and represent her here. So I will proceed just to read her speech, make some highlights, some few points, so that we don't waste time. So I'm not going to resort to the PowerPoint presentation. The first point we want to make is that we are extremely delighted to the organizers for inviting the African Union to be part of this Congress taking place in this beautiful city of Cape Town, so that we can all put our heads together and share some thoughts on how we can take conservation agriculture forward. But the logical starting place is for us to look at the background of African agriculture. Invariably, with the exception of South Africa and few countries in North Africa, the situation of agriculture in Africa is that it is still dominated by peasant small-scale farmers, usually cultivating 1 to 2 acres, largely rain-fed and utilizing very rudimentary inputs, relying on continuous tillage-based system. This has, to a large extent, contributed to the low productivity of African agriculture, which Louis referred to at the beginning of the discussion. Invariably, the end result is that Africa has to rely on a lot of imports, food importation, to feed itself. And this situation was brought to bear as part of the Russian-Ukraine crisis, where you find that a continent of 1.4 billion people is relying on small Ukraine for much of its grain. Ukraine currently has a population of just 39 million people. If you compare it to even Uganda, Uganda has a population of 42 million people. So you see, we should be ashamed of ourselves in Africa. That shows us the challenge of what we need to do. Invariably, we'll be told that the continent has the least mechanized agricultural system in the world. I mean, the statistics were provided this morning. FAO estimated that 65% of the farm power is still provided by human muscles, and the rest by draught animals, just roughly about 25%. It is only 10% that is contributed by engine power. Most of it also relying on fuel, fossil fuel, so it is not sustainable. Therefore, a transformation of the agri system is necessary, not only to increase production, like my head of CIMIT made, but also enabling sustainable and equitable food systems that generate wealth for small producers. They are key. And agricultural practitioners along the value chain, including workers, women, and youth. We must also prioritize access to nutritious food, environmental sustainability, and resilience. This is where the conservation agriculture comes in. We need conservation agriculture as well as sustainable agri-mechanization to assist us in this transformation of African agriculture. I attended the 3rd Congress on Conservation Agriculture held in Rabat, Morocco from 5 to 6 June 2023. We sort of strengthened Africa's position on conservation agriculture. A lot was achieved, but there is still a long way to go. There is so much knowledge in this room, so we want to see how we can tap this knowledge from the presentations we'll be going on this morning. Let me briefly talk about the AU retiring the whole to the museum, which I was originally invited to speak upon, and how to tie it together. Invariably, as we heard from the discussions at the last session, women are the backbone of African agriculture across the value chain, especially rural production and marketing. In some African countries, they account for up to 50% of the labor force in family farming. Unfortunately, while women account for this large proportion feeding the continent, they have remained largely in the background, calling little attention to themselves and receiving very little assistance. In a bid to change this narrative, especially the drudgery faced by women farmers, the Africa Union Commission, under the SY chairperson, Her Excellency Nkosi Dlamini Zuma, incidentally from South Africa, launched a campaign to confine the handheld phone to the museum in 2015 during the AU summit. What she did was to symbolically give a tillage to all African heads of states with the hope that they will stop the drudgery being experienced by African women through mechanization in 10 years. Well, looking at the statistics, it has not come to bear, but some effort is being made in this direction. Invariably, since my boss took office as commissioner in 2017, she has committed herself to this, sending the whole to the museum. Many of you must have heard of the Bobo Dioulasso Declaration, which was where she brought about 2,000 women together and gave them a small implement. That is because we want to mechanize along the value chain. Since then, the event has been shifted to different sub-regions of Africa on October 15 during the commemoration of International Year for Rural Women. The last one was held in Kenya. That of this year, arrangements are already being made. It's going to be held in Ethiopia. But I'm not going to bore you. It was part of realizing this concept that we partnered with FAO to do the SAM, that is the FSAMA, the framework for sustainable mechanization for Africa. So much has already been said, and I'm sure the four other speakers will be talking about the implementation of the FSAMA. The only point I want to make, that I want to add to it, is that there was a demand for that sustainable framework for mechanization. It was the African Ministers of Agriculture that requested the AU to work on it. So invariably, we'll be trying to tell them that this is the document. I mean, you should try and engage so that we implement this particular document, which is why we are working with DIMS. That is the directors of mechanization in different African countries. To save some more time, how do we move ahead in terms of upscaling conservation agriculture that we have identified to be part of the solution to Africa's problem? That was what I will spend my last part, 2 or 3 points to make. The first point I'm going to make is that looking at conservation agriculture, adoption and practice of conservation agriculture require appropriate and specialized tools, equipment, and implements that enable farmers to coherently implement the 3 core principles of continuous minimum soil disturbance, permanent retention of organic soil cover, and diversification of crop species growing in sequence or associations. Thus, scale appropriate conservation-based sustainable agri-mechanization is paramount to the spread and scaling of conservation agriculture in Africa. What then do we do to take this forward? The first point I'm going to make is that this session at the 9th World Congress of Conservation Agriculture presents us with a platform to discuss the challenges and opportunities of SAM as an accelerator to the adoption of conservation agriculture and sustainable agriculture in general. The critical aspect that should be prominent in this discussion should include how to address the mechanization challenge facing all categories of farmers in adopting sustainable agricultural practices and innovations, and the synergy and complementarities necessary between small, medium, and large-scale farmers. The next point I want to make is that we now have an opportunity to make farming a less risky and profitable business that is attractive to the youths with conservation agriculture and mechanization combined. The proof of content is abundant technologies, innovations, and practices proven by science and practitioners across Africa. Those doing it right are reaping huge benefits already without degrading the natural environment. More importantly, conservation, agriculture, and some technologies, innovation, and practices, including innovations, drones, robotics, solar/electric machines, solar pumping for irrigation in some areas, already abound with national agri-research systems and international research centers such as the SIGA group. The CIMET gave us a presentation here. What is left is how the private sector needs to be consolidated to define investment needs and the scaling pathways, including clearer roles, incentives for the major actors, including the farmers themselves. The investments also need to be purposely targeted to cater not only for the hardware aspect of conservation, agriculture, and SAM, but also the software aspects, including climate-smart agriculture, priority commodities for holistic support along the entire value chain. At the African Union, we have some commodity which we call orphan crops. I'm not going to bore you. Capacity development, innovative financing, knowledge management, and information sharing, among others. Finally, the point I also want to make is that the African Union needs to be fully engaged to mainstream conservation agriculture, not just in the sending the hoe or mechanization program, but other initiatives such as the African's Fertilizer and Soil Health Plan, adopted after the very successful African Fertilizer and Soil Health Summit held this year, as well as the ongoing post-Malabo process to unveil a 10-year agricultural plan for Africa. The summit will be held early next year in Uganda and Kampala. So I suggest that we should look for ways of mainstreaming conservation agriculture into Africa's new 10-year plan to change the agricultural system. All what is left for me is to, on behalf of the commissioner, express our gratitude to the organizers of this conference, as well as this plenary session. Our hope is that the decisions and commitments made during this discussion will undulate beyond our gathering and have a profound impact on the livelihood of millions of Africans. Let us seize this opportunity to forge partnership, leverage innovations, approaches, and advance the shared vision of mechanized conservation agriculture that will propel Africa towards a future of prosperity and abundance for all. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Theo Jerome. And thanks for reminding us the statistics of the drudgery the African farmers are facing, largely women. 65% of the work that is done on the farm by muscle. And the importance of youth and women in this mechanization agenda, as well as highlighting the importance of synergies between large, medium, and small-scale farmers. I think that is something we need to exploit. Those synergies, we need to identify them and exploit them. As Simit said, as Said said, business models are critical to try and get some adopted by farmers. Thank you very much. May I now call the next speaker, who is going to deliver her speech via video. She could not be with us today. That is Katie Freeman from the World Bank. Can you please play the video? They don't, do they have the video? Maybe. Okay, she's actually going to speak virtually from DC, from Washington, DC. So they will connect with her. While we wait for her to connect, I think we'll get the next speaker, Dr. Sigland Snap from CIMIT, and she's going to complement the work of her boss and go more down to Africa and say more about what is happening in Africa. Over to you, Dr. Snap.
Thank you. I must say this is the most inclusive podium I've ever had. You can actually see me over it. Thank you, South Africa, for a constitution that's very inclusive and podiums as well. So I am very excited about this opportunity to follow up on our opening remarks we heard from Professor Strauss about how we are here to learn together. That was inspiring to me because I have always felt that if it's not us, then who is it? If it's not now, then who? Because it's the scientists, the farmers that we've been hearing from, the private sector, like such as John Deere, that are going to solve these problems together. So we know that our grandchildren are waiting for us, and of course our children too, but as a grandmother, our grandchildren, right? Don't we love them? That we need to protect this land. And yet there is this unfolding, this moving disaster called soil degradation that unfortunately many practices that that farmers are having to follow. Many farmers try to upgrade to improve their soil health, as we've heard today, but others, unfortunately, are part of this ongoing disaster of soil health problems. So at CIMIT, we are working with all of you on the analysis that it takes, the bottlenecks, to understand how we can address the need for more knowledge, for reducing the labor, the drudgery, for addressing the business models, the service provider models. So those are the three areas I'm going to briefly talk on. When I came in 1993 to Malawi, before we even had free South Africa, this is what I saw. And it broke my heart to see families turning the land and life expectancies of around 55. So, which is not unrelated to this backbreaking work. Now, we've been hearing about these same statistics, right? That 65%, as you said, sir, muscle, right? Hand hoe. Only 12% mechanization. But these averages hide the fact that, in fact, there are areas where mechanization is happening. And it's so important. There's so much talk about fertilizer prices going through the roof. And how do we increase them? So there's efforts around apps and trying to get the knowledge to farmers, but without mechanization, we will not have the soil health. We will not have the no-till, the types of even plant population densities, the timeliness of weeding, the timeliness of fertilizer application. So mechanization is on so many levels key to improving crop per drop, for improving fertilizer efficiency. And it's not impossible to get there. I still get people that say, well, what is a research organization looking at mechanization? Again, it comes back to the analysis of bottlenecks. It comes back to from Bangladesh to Zimbabwe, trying to do action research to adapt the many types of mechanization that works where. And also the different models, you can do research on different types of finance, inclusive, because many farmers are there interested in becoming service providers. I have myself met women who are now are actually doing the no-till planting, doing the building of planting basins, who are providing these services to others, and especially youth, are very interested in how do they provide a service. They're not interested in getting into agriculture for its own sake, but it has to be an opportunity, a business opportunity for them. So together, through agile agronomy, through agile ag systems, we can provide more options, can support the action learning that communities want to do, and work through public, private, and civil society partnerships to deliver this at scale. So we have seen how, whether it's developing different machine prototypes, or whether it's developing different models in inclusive finance, teaching and training together with banks, there is markets out there that they don't always realize. There may be women or older people or youth that are interested in becoming service providers. So learning to broaden our scope and who we can see as farmers. We always talk about including women, but this isn't just about because it's good to do that. It's because everyone needs to be at the table as part of sustainable agri-food systems. And everyone is at the table, so let's try and empower them to be part of scaling conservation agriculture. So we've been hearing about mechanization, and we all are very interested in making that work. But it's also about knowledge. You know, this revolution in new types of mobile money, of mobile information is coming out of Africa to a large extent. You know, I bought my home from sitting in Zimbabwe with a Mango phone. I don't know how many of you remember the Mango phones, but this was a revolution. You didn't have that in Michigan yet, but you had it in Zimbabwe. So these types of mobile information are now reaching different people. With you can, right in a phone, you can now measure your soil carbon. That didn't used to be possible. The big labs that we used to have with wet chemistry now are being replaced in large part by spectral information, and some of this is coming right down to your phone. And we're making sure at CIMMYT that this is a digital, inclusive environment. In fact, tomorrow there's a special session on gender where you can hear more about how inclusive this is and some of the challenges there. But digital champions are making sure that everyone, even with the flip phone, can use voice-activated information so they can learn what other farmers are doing about their soils that have similar soil types, or other farmers are solving problems around mechanization. So this revolution is not just for the big farmers, it is also for small-scale farmers and also people that have never been part of the revolution before. So it's a very exciting time. And you can see some of the different information about how it can reduce drudgery, about how we can, in fact, support innovation by farmers. Farmers are innovating all the time, as we know, and that's why I'm thrilled to be here and hear so much from farmers who are solving these problems, because conservation agriculture looks different everywhere. I used to be part of a long-term trial, and now I am also leading a number of long-term trials at CIMMYT. But what is always interesting is to think about how do you do long-term trials, long-term experiments about conservation agriculture? Because every conservation tillage implement looks different because farmers are always welding and changing those. So it's an adaptation, it's a partnership with farmers. That's how we do long-term experiments. And that's how we support the innovation around two-wheel tractors, to be able to do strip intercrops for the first time ever in certain places. So that is part of conservation agriculture, the crop diversity, as we've heard about, not just the tillage. And to make these actually work, we need the service provider models, and it in turn leads to something I saw this year that will really change forever how I look at our commitment to conservation agriculture, because this is one of the worst droughts, certainly the worst droughts I've ever seen in my lifetime. So 30 years, I have never seen what has hit Zambia, what has hit central Malawi. And this was widespread devastation, just everywhere you could see. There was nothing green, except where? Except where there was crop diversification, where there was drought-tolerant maize varieties, and where, as you can see, this woman is smiling because she still is getting a harvest because of conservation agriculture. So I think we can learn from the resilience of farmers in this region and now take it to the farmer more broadly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Snap, for that presentation. And I think the point you highlight, basic agronomy tells you that you have to have the right plant population. Fertilizer placement and amounts have to be good, have to be appropriate. And what you've just told us that without mechanization, it's difficult to achieve those. So you're actually not getting the best out of your seed. You're not getting the best out of your fertilizer without mechanization. And the resilience that is apparent right now as we speak, because we've got an intense drought in Southern Africa, because of conservation agriculture is something that we have to think about. And for us to get conservation agriculture to be working, we need mechanization. Thank you very much, Dr. Snap. I don't know, are we ready to, we're ready? Okay, I would now want to welcome Ms. Katie Freeman, who is senior economist with the World Bank, also a program leader in the bank. And she is going to speak to us about the directions of investment in sustainable agriculture mechanization with conservation agriculture. Ms. Freeman, welcome to the 9th
Thank you so
Congress on
much.
Conservation Agriculture.
Thank you very
take the
much.
floor.
Can you hear me? I just want to confirm that you can hear me before I start.
You need to unmute that, so just. She's unmuted.
Can you hear me?
But it's speaking sound once.
Can you hear us, Ms. Freeman?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We
I
can't
can
hear
hear
you.
You can't hear me.
We can see, but we can't hear. Colleagues?
Can you hear me? Hello? No. Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Sorry, the call cannot be completed as dialed. Please check the number and dial again.
Hello? Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
To Zoom, enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. I was going to try to join by phone too, but I'm glad that you got this to work. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And apologies for that blip with the audio. It's wonderful to be here with you this afternoon, and apologies for not being able to join in person. But it's a pleasure for me to be able to speak, in part because conservation agriculture and sustainable agricultural mechanization are two issues that are so important for the World Bank, especially in the context of the work that we're doing right now. So I will ask colleagues in the room to control my slides, please, and we can go to the first slide. So I'd like to start with a bit of background about the issue from the World Bank perspective. Increasing agri-food activities to feed a growing population increases greenhouse gas emissions, as we all know, which contribute to temperature rise, decreasing agricultural yields, And this leads to more agri-food activities, a rebound effect, to compensate for losses and even more emissions. So in fact, we are basically chasing a moving target. We need to break this cycle through both mitigation and adaptation actions and create a sustainable food system that feeds the world in a more sustainable way. And there's an opportunity, we think, to accelerate climate action through climate smart agriculture with practices such as conservation agriculture. Next slide, please. So we are actually one slide back. So if you could go back one slide, please. Perfect. So the World Bank follows a climate smart agriculture approach for achieving sustainable food system transformation. On the mitigation side, we look to reduce emissions and emission intensity of food production, minimize food loss and waste, and support sequestration. On the adaptation side, we adjust food system in response to climatic changes to reduce harm and enhance resilience in our client countries. And for productivity in agriculture, we're looking to enhance the yield per unit of input, basically to produce more with less. With the urgent need to sustainably transform our global food systems, the World Bank has increased its support for climate smart agriculture, including conservation agriculture, which all contribute to a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions through the efficient use of resources and carbon sequestration. The World Bank's Agriculture and Food Global Practices share of project financing that contributes to climate change mitigation and adaptation has increased steadily from $326 million in fiscal year 2013 to $3 billion last fiscal year at the World Bank. So this is a real marker of the importance and the contribution that the World Bank is placing on this area. Next slide, please. The bank also tracks the number of farmers who adopt improved agricultural technology as a result of World Bank project support and aligns this with the promotion of conservation agriculture. In addition, the IFC, part of the World Bank Group, has a new climate smart agriculture strategy under the World Bank's Climate Change Action Plan, which focuses on improving productivity through precision farming and conservation agriculture. Within the framework of these things, you can see conservation agriculture is an important part of the World Bank's support to support sustainable landscape management practices and the adoption of improved agricultural technologies by farmers. Next slide, please. We know that research has shown repeatedly that adopting some climate smart agricultural practices can increase labor requirements in the short run, where agricultural mechanization is still limited. Given this, we need to and see value in increasing investments in sustainable agricultural mechanization. Crop yields in Africa are only 56% of the international average, and mechanization can help to sustainably increase these yields over the coming decade and also help to address issues of land degradation and boost climate resilience. For example, in West Africa, where I've worked for many years, where agricultural mechanization remains modest, the promotion and use of mechanization can positively improve yields while reducing harvests and post-harvest losses. The level of mechanization has significantly positive impacts in the cost, output value, income, and return on all crop types. For every 1% increase in the level of mechanization, the yields of all crops, grain crops, and cash crops increase by 1.2%, 1.6%, and 0.45% respectively, according to research that we rely on at the World Bank. Sustainable agricultural mechanization with conservation agriculture has the potential to regenerate and reclaim degraded lands from improper farming practices and convert some of these soils into things that we can use again, meaning that we can also curb the agricultural expansion into things like native forests, for example. Next slide, please. So what is the World Bank doing in particular on this? We're doing many things across the globe, but here I wanted to present briefly a small amount of work that we're doing under the West Africa Food Systems Resilience Program. In support of the objectives of conservation agriculture and improved sustainable mechanization, the World Bank is working through resources from the Koreans through a trust fund we have called the Korean Green Growth Trust Fund to support agricultural mechanization in West Africa. The objective of the trust fund is to mainstream inclusive green growth throughout World Bank operations and to identify innovative and operational solutions to specific development challenges. In this case, we are working with the African Conservation Tillage Network Act to support sustainable agricultural mechanization in World Bank operations and with regional African organizations in West Africa and Central Africa to boost sustainable agricultural mechanization. The specific objective of this grant is to expand smallholders' access to sustainable agricultural mechanization technologies, services, and information across West Africa. The pilot is regional, and so we're using these resources to support the Food Systems Resilience Program, but we're piloting in Ghana with the idea that this will benefit all of the Food Systems Resilience Program countries and have spillovers to other countries in West Africa. So it's working in addition with ACT, who I mentioned, also with the Center for No-Till Agriculture and the Ghana Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Next slide, please. Under this small grant, we are piloting a modality of working both with ACT, but also with other institutions like CORAF across West Africa to mainstream some of the ideas and initiatives behind sustainable agricultural mechanization. In particular, it's supporting an Africa mechanized platform to support agricultural sustainable agricultural mechanization in Africa. Together with the African Union Commission and the FAO, we are working to support the framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization that was launched in 2018 with 10 priority areas geared towards mainstreaming sustainable agricultural mechanization into national and regional programs. ACT at this time in 2018 was selected to host the digital platform, and the Africa Mechanization Platform is being gradually built with support from the FAO, with the AUC, and in particular with resources from this small grant. The grant is supporting a needs assessment, a strategy document for the development of the platform, and the development of different elements of the platform, including digitalization of capacity buildings, webinars, digital marketing of technologies, etc. In addition to that work, the pilot is also piloting bundles of sustainable agricultural mechanization services across some of the Food Systems Resilience Program countries together with the CGIAR. The intention of that is to provide evidence on the sustainability and profitability of sustainable agricultural mechanization, and also look at some of the ways that bundling different types of sustainable agricultural mechanization services with digital services can help improve the efficacy of some of these technologies. This will be piloted in particular in Ghana, but is being done together with CORAF, with the idea that CORAF's Center for Specialty in Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization can help broaden some of the learnings from this work to countries across the Food Systems Resilience Program and also CORAF's member countries across the region. The program will also finance the development of a strategy policy document on sustainable agricultural mechanization in West Africa to build awareness and advocacy for this in the region. It will support development of a strategic policy document that showcases scientific evidence, case studies, and success stories on the sustainability and profitability of sustainable agricultural mechanization for farmers and providers. And this activity will be led by ACT with additional partnerships, including, as I mentioned, FAO, CORAF, and Korean partners through this grant. And then lastly, the program will finance the development of a strategy for scale up of the context in this World Bank financed program called the Food Systems Resilience Program. In particular, it will work with CORAF to put sustainable agricultural technologies in CORAF's market of technologies and the technology parks that they're financing. It will look to how sustainable mechanization can contribute to preparedness against food insecurity and increasing resilience in some of the countries. And it will also look at how to contribute to ECOWAS's larger agenda on soil health and fertility across the ECOWAS region, in particular through the Food Systems Resilience Program, but also through a new Dutch finance program called Soil Values, which will try to, together with the African Union Commission, improve the use and also sustainability of soils across the region. So sustainable agricultural mechanization technologies and conservation agriculture have a role to play in these large programs that are unfolding too. Next slide, please. Moving forward, some of the enabling environment to scale up sustainable agricultural mechanization and the way that we are seeing it at the World Bank is that from an inclusion perspective, governments and civil society should collaborate to ensure transition to sustainable agricultural mechanization is equitable, just, and socially inclusive for all disadvantaged groups. Incentives need to be aligned. So we are doing a lot of work on repurposing agricultural subsidies globally. And there's the potential to include conservation agriculture in the receipt of some of these repurposed resources. Information, we need to capitalize together as a group on low-cost digital technologies to scale up sustainable agricultural mechanization. And that is part of the work that this Korean Green Growth Trust Fund will do in the Food Systems Resilience Program in West Africa, the work that I described. Investments, this is the role of the World Bank too. We need to invest to provide enabling environment for private sector to come in and leverage some of the private sector capital in these areas. In terms of institution, we need to shift climate institutions' focus towards sustainable agricultural mechanization and bring in more institutions who are aligned with climate goals. And finally, innovation. We all need to work on and think about mechanization across the entire value chain from a conservation agriculture perspective and from the perspective of building resilience in the client countries where the World Bank works. Next slide, please. That is it from me. Thank you so much. And the final thing I wanted to say as I close is that in these programs, the Food Systems Resilience Program, as well as the work together with ACT and FAO on the Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization Platform in West Africa, we welcome partnerships and would welcome those who are doing similar pieces of work or would like to engage in either of those programs to come, because the only way that these things will work in West Africa is through partnership and a collaborative platform. So thank you very much, and I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Katie, for your presentation. We hope you can stay on because there could be questions that will be coming your way. Thank you so much, and for highlighting the key points that other colleagues have mentioned about the efficiency that mechanization brings to conservation agriculture in terms of yields, in terms of production. And your last slide on the 6 I's as enabling environment are quite interesting. Thank you. We have another presenter who is going to make the presentation via video. This is Professor Geoffrey Murema, who is the Professor of Agricultural Engineering at Sokoine University in the United Republic of Tanzania. Professor.
Thank you. I speak from Morogoro, Tanzania, from the Sokoine University of Agriculture, School of Engineering, where I work as a professor of agricultural engineering. The topic is conservation agriculture and sustainable agriculture mechanization synergy, and we'll look at the role of medium-scale farmers. Well, to start, the Sokoine University of Agriculture is has been here in Morogoro for quite some years, since 1984. It has over 17,000 students and about 1,000 researchers, academic researchers, located in 5 campuses all over Tanzania. The FSAM was developed through an African-wide consultative process lasting 30 months. And the process developing was very consultative and involved 3 stakeholder meetings. There was also quite close linkage between ACT and the FSAMA team. We reviewed agricultural mechanization from the 1940s, including failures and successes in sub-Saharan Africa and experience of other regions. We took a long-term perspective from 2000 to 2050, that is particularly demographic trends. And if you look at demographic trends, if you look at the figure aside here, the population will increase quite significantly during this period from 2020 all the way to 2050. But even more important is the rate of increase of the urban population vis-a-vis that of rural population. As you can see here, the urban population is projected to grow to over 1.2, close to 1.2 million in 2050, while the rural population would be less than 1 billion. Now, some 10 elements is there, the commercial sustainability and environmental sustainability and socioeconomic sustainability. These are listed in the text, which is available on the FAO and ACT's websites. If we turn now to the real element CA and SAMA, element 6, the sustainable transformation of land preparation and crop husbandry practices, if you look at the crop under conservation agriculture in Africa on both large, small-scale farmers, medium-scale farmers, and large-scale farmers in 2017, this was the scenario then. We had a total area of 1.366 million hectares, with small-scale farmers taking 811,000 hectares, medium-scale farmers very small, 33%, 33 million hectares, and large-scale farmers doing 521. And this is what represents close to 60%, 2.5%, and 38%. 90% of small-scale farmers are located in 4 countries: Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. The CA area and the medium-scale farmers is significant, at only 2.5%. In terms of the CA area and the large-scale farmers, 84% of it was in South Africa. Since then, the CA area by large-scale farmers in South Africa has increased significantly to 1.75 million hectares, while for medium-scale farmers, it remains nil. Land preparation by both medium-scale farmers and large-scale farmers is mostly by mechanical means, yet it is surprising that there is no uptake of CA by medium-scale farmers in Africa. Now, this is significant since areas under different farm categories in Africa are pointing towards a significant increase of medium-scale farmers. And if you look at 4 countries, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania, and Zambia, medium-scale farmers, the dark line there, are becoming increasingly important and approaching. In some countries like Zambia, they're even doing large area than the small-scale farmers. And same in Tanzania, Kenya, and Ghana. And this is a trend throughout Africa. So it's important we have to take this. This is a new kid on the block, and we have to take these medium-scale farmers quite seriously. If you look at specific figures, for example, look at Ghana areas under different groups. It's 2017, you had, for example, small-scale farmers, 30,000, large-scale farmers, 0 in Ghana, and as well as medium-scale farmers. Kenya had 17,000 nil, and large-scale farmers, 15,000 hectares. Tanzania, 11,000 small-scale farmers, nil, medium, and 21 in large-scale. Zambia, 280,000 in the small-scale farmers, nil, medium-scale, and large-scale, 36,000. Zimbabwe, 90 small-scale farmers, medium, nil, and that. And South Africa had 1.5 small-scale farmers, nil, and 436. And we know that since then, for South Africa, sea areas in 2021 by large-scale farmers has increased to 1.75 million hectares, while for medium-scale farmers it remains nil. So the medium-scale farmers are becoming quite important for production of staple cereals in Africa, that is maize, rice, wheat, and sorghum. They produce almost 80% of the cereal grains which reach the market in sub-Saharan Africa, important for feeding both the urban and rural consumers. And the question which comes up now is, why are these medium-scale farmers not adopting CA? We need to find why, as they also provide machinery and services to the small-scale farmers. Too much of our research and development effort has been directed on the issue of small CA for small-scale farmers. Now maybe it's time to move up the ladder and look at CA and SAM for medium-scale farmers who are increasingly assuming a critical role in food security in sub-Saharan Africa. We have to plan and strategize for SAM to fit the conditions of the second, third, and fourth decades of the 21st century, and not those of mid-20th century, where 90% of the population was living in rural areas. Therefore, we can conclusively say that the medium-scale farmers are critical for both SAM and CA. The medium-scale farmers are the ones who are likely to be able to mobilize resources to procure the machinery and implements required for both sustainable agriculture mechanization CA, since we're now talking of private sector-led mechanization. They're also the ones who are likely to produce the surplus food required by the increasing urban and rural population over the next three decades. And they're also the ones who are likely to service and manage the supply chains for SAM and CA as inputs as well as outputs of farming. There's certainly a need for paradigm shift from the ones of 20th century to new ones for 21st century. And this will need to involve more attention to the medium-scale farmers. Both sustainable agriculture mechanization and CA provide a pathway forward for this paradigm shift. Thank you. Thank you. I speak from Morogoro, Tanzania, from the Sokoine University of Agriculture, School of Engineering.
Asante sana, Prof. We really appreciate your presentation. And I think the point I take from his presentation is, are we dealing with the right typology of farmers come 2050? Are we still working with what the situation is in the last century, or we need to change? We need to model and see what is the proportion of the different farmer typologies as we move into the next 20, 30 years. Thank you so much, Prof. I think we have the last presentation, which is my colleague from FAO, Joseph Kinsley. He leads the Sustainable Agriculture Mechanization Program in FAO headquarters. Over to you, Joseph.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for staying on. After all this presentation, there's not much more to say. Everything, most of it was said, what I wanted to say, but let me maybe try to systemize a little bit. I will skip the introduction because we have heard this morning about the 60% smallholders and so on. I want to go back to the overview of the strategic framework for sustainable agricultural mechanization. FAO is kind of the technical custodian for this framework, and it is kind of unique to have a framework for Africa for sustainable mechanization. And with these 10 elements, element number 1, boosting farm power. It's the most important element in my opinion, because in the year 2024, it's ethically unacceptable that 65%, in some countries 90%, have to use hand tools for subsistence farming and for their daily food production. So boosting farm power is by no doubt what this continent needs. And how, that's the question. But there's no question that it doesn't need it. It does need it. And that comes to element number 2. We need innovative business models, finance models. We have the financial institutions that are, and the banks, they have begun to see it, but it was a slow process. But we today have models, for example, Aglisco in Zambia, that supports farmer groups with business models that they can afford small equipment. So that's a positive. Third, building sustainable supply chains. And here I mean private sector-led supply chains. I'm so happy to have one major machinery supplier here being the main sponsor. That has not happened in the 9 or in the 8 World Congresses of CA before. It's the first time. And I'm happy for it, because it's the private sector that needs to build up the supply chains, not only to the capital, to the district and beyond, for making farmers aware of what is possible. Maybe I should also say that, of course, the suppliers should think who are their clients. And sometimes I have the feeling big is beautiful was too long a paradigm for the private sector. We need to rethink. Smallholder farmers need different equipment, and we have seen that in some of the presentations before. The next one, across the agri-food value chain. It was just mentioned by the World Bank. We need mechanization across the food value chain to avoid overproduction and then waste of harvest, waste of produce. Mechanization along the value chain, all along to processing, transporting, marketing. Innovations, no questions about that, at all levels, all the time, and we heard this from Simit. Farmers do adapt, and every seeder looks in the end a little bit different, and that's a good thing. So these were the 5 commercially oriented elements of the SAMA framework. Now we come to number 6, and Professor Mehmer just mentioned it. Element number 6 is the only one that talks about environmental sustainability. And that's the reason why this session is in this Congress, because it means we don't mechanize the classical way. We talk about sustainable agricultural mechanization, meaning there is no rule in the world that says there is a disc plow behind the tractor. We need diversification of equipment. We need to make the CA equipment available in the local areas, starting from the ripper, subsoiler, of course, all sorts of seeders for all sorts of power sources, including animal traction. What we maybe should avoid and what is maybe not sustainable is the hand hoe-based CA system, the conservation farming system that was for a long time promoted also, including by FAO. We need to go beyond that level to be attractive, basically. That was element number 6. Now, 7 is about the socioeconomic scenario. Women use needs to be attracted to farming. There's no other way. The average farmer is globally old. It's old people. And we need the young generation to go back to think, I want to become a farmer and I want to be in my village to do exactly that, or if not, a service provider. Number 8 is about capacity development across the board. Yes, we need more capacity development, we need training in business, in mechanics, in operation of machinery, in calibration of machinery. That's no doubt about that. Then we have, in the end, the last two. Number 9 is about the long-term vision. We don't need a 2-year program, a 3-year program. We need 10-year programs, maybe longer, to overcome this backlog of that this continent is in still with the use of technology and mechanization at all levels, smallholder, medium-scale farmers, and large-scale farmers. And I agree with Professor Mrema, maybe we need this new breed of medium-scale farmers, but also of service providers that provide services, mechanization services to the smallholders around them in their community. Finally, the element number 10 is about working together. And we have many partners here, and I'm very happy that the CIMMYT DG has made the point and that he's here with us, because we, FAO and CIMMYT, work very well together in Zambia, for example, but also in many other places. What have we done? We are doing trainings, we are doing webinars, we are working towards collaborative alliances. We're working with the African Conservation Tillage Network. We're working with the European Conservation Agriculture Federation. We're working with the European Agricultural Machinery Association. And we try to make these associations aware that there's another continent, because in this continent, in Africa, these associations have not evolved. They are not, it's hard to find associations for machinery in Africa. It's important to link up, to help for the European industry, for example, for the global industry, to support, because it cannot only be public sector development agencies and UN and FAO, it must be including the private sector. We have developed e-learning models for mechanization business providers together with CIMMYT. They are available online and for free in the FAO online e-learning center. The main work that we are doing is developing, revising, renewing agriculture and mechanization strategies at national level, because governments have to understand to sort out the role of the private sector and of the public sector. Public sector procurement has to end, because public sector procurement always comes automatically with the plow. We don't want, the tractor is the power source, and then we have equipment, and equipment is diverse, and CA equipment is very specific. So there is a need for the farmers and for the service providers to choose what they need for their business. And they might not need that disc plow that comes automatically when the government starts procuring. So there is a big need for a sustainable mechanization strategy at national level to sort out the role of the government, the role of institutions like research, extension, and the role of the private sector. And these are the countries where we are currently have been supporting and helping to revise the mechanization strategy. So, future trends, my real topic. We want to continue with working on sustainable mechanization strategies and policies with the governments and the countries. We will to continue to work on capacity development and education at all levels. We know that new technologies need to be included. This can also be ICT for calling, the Uber for tractor calling is very popular. There's the Hello tractor, there's the Toto tractor, there are other similar businesses, but we also have heard about sensors and artificial intelligence and modern machinery this morning. We know we need to work on climate smart agriculture, and a lot has been said about that, specifically for Southern Africa. We need to secure more funding for projects and for programs. We have a program for summer in our drawers. We wait it to be implemented. It will include a Center for Sustainable Agricultural Mechanization for Africa that we want to help building up because we think it's required and it's needed. And I was very pleased to hear just before me the World Bank speaker that in West Africa, ECOWAS region, there seems to be a lot of new ideas and new initiatives going on, which is really great. In FAO, FAO is known for a huge farmer field school network, and hundreds and thousands of farmer field school groups are active in Africa, but also other regions and other continents. We have started using these groups for innovations in small-scale sustainable mechanization. This is a new FAO idea, and we are just at the moment launching the first calls for going into this direction. We want to foster the collaboration between government and private sector, and I just said why. We need more data. FAO in the year 2010 has stopped collecting data for agricultural mechanization and for tractors and machinery. It was not considered important at that time. Fortunately, the year 2024, we have just launched a new data monitoring and collection facility to get from our friends from the statistics division to reintroduce agricultural machinery data in the FAO Stat global statistical programs, because it's important, as we know. Challenges. As I just said, we might need more involvement of the private sector in mechanization development at the country level. We still have a sometimes ineffective enabling environment. We're still seeking appropriate and sustainable mechanization business models suitable for the African context. We have good starts, but each country, each district might have a different problem, and the business models need to be adjusted for sustainable mechanization. As mechanization requires significant capital investment, politicians, partners, and donors are hesitant to invest in substantial support because it has to be long-term support, and that's a challenge. So maybe this meeting again helps to convince this or that donor that we need a long-term vision for sustainable agricultural mechanization. And we have a kind of lack of experience in developing and implementing sustainable agricultural mechanization strategies. What does it exactly mean? And that's exactly why FAO works with governments to overcome that problem. With that, I think that was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for that presentation and for reminding us of the pillars of the FSAMA, the 10 pillars of the FSAMA, and also bring in some more issues around the challenges that are faced by those who want to implement some. May I ask the other presenters, please, to come on? And I would like to thank you once again for staying on. And I don't think if you have questions, you should be given the opportunity to ask the questions. And I would like to ask the presenters, Dr. Snap, Engineer Muremwa, Engineer Mkoma, Dr. Jerome, please hop up the stage and let's have a conversation with the audience. Would like to give you an opportunity to seek points of clarification, questions that you might have to the 5 speakers that we have in front of us. So it's over to you, colleagues. Any questions, comments that you would like to? You have stayed on, you have done very well to stay on. I think you deserve to ask questions. You have that time to ask questions to these colleagues here. Or is it that the energy levels have gone too low? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is El Hassan Bourarash. I am working with the ACT and with the FAO on sustainable mechanization. We have farm leaders in North Africa. Few, you can count them on the fingers of hand. And I was happy to see that in South Africa there is a lot of good farmers, model farmers, big farmers with a good knowledge on CA. In all our countries, African countries, we have a lack of human resources. Joseph Kinsley pointed that, and other speakers point this. In Summit also did speak about that. The problem is how, or the question is, did we have prepared a new generation of experts like the experts we are seeing here in this Congress? And if no, if yes, what we need to improve this upgrading of our engineers and our PhDs, they are formatted on conventional tillage, not on conservation tillage. So how to upgrade also people working on our ministries around Africa or other developing countries. And if we have not prepared this new generation, how to do it? There is some trainings done by FAO, but it's not enough. We need to develop really good curricula in our schools, in our universities. So that's my question. It's not just for the panels, but for other participants. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Any other question? Yeah, as you said, anyone can take it. Whoever feels comfortable can take that one. If none of you are.
Hi, my name's Dana Smurin. I'm with the Regenerative Lab. We do consulting where there's bottlenecks and broken systems. We are in Europe, the US, here in South Africa. And recently, one of the problems I was trying to solve for is exactly what you just brought up. And also realizing a lot of people aren't able to go to school or able to go to university. The youth migration or migration from rural into peri-urban or urban areas is classically here in South Africa a major problem. We need inspiration in our youth. We have the largest unemployed youth, I think, in South Africa than anywhere else in the world. And so one of the things that I came across was called 4 Returns. It's out of the Netherlands, a group called Common Land, and they look at a holistic approach, which seems to be really logical for Africa. They look at the first of 4 principles is inspiration, motivating and engaging communities. The second is building social capital, then natural capital, and then economic return. But the thing that really struck me the most, which applies for Africa, is it looks at the landscape. It looks at the water, the terrain, the community, the people, and the agricultural possibilities. And coming out of academia, coming out of having worked in government in the past, I wonder whether we're beginning to integrate a more holistic approach. How do we deliver education fast-tracked? You don't have to go and take 2 years out of your life to go to university, or your parents have to save enough money to buy the school uniforms that you can go to school. How do we deliver in a fun, theatrical, community-based, collective, inspiring way musicians, artists, politicians, everyone comes together to really create a culture around food and conservation agriculture? And I really challenge these wonderful institutions who have for so long delivered solutions. And at the same time, I've done conferences with a bunch of scientists from multiple African universities. And when we import technology from Europe, from the US, North America, and it breaks, we can wait for 6 months for somebody to come and recalibrate a machine. So how do you create partnerships where we can do localization in developing these mechanisms, these machineries? How do we have joint ventures? How do we leverage the value of 3D printing? So we would love to have development of the technology we need here on the continent.
Thank you. Any other question? Will be the last one, maybe. Please make it as short as possible, to the point.
Thank you all. It's very impressive and very diverse. As I said, I'm Meena Devkota, an agronomist with Canada. So my question is, yes, appropriate mechanization is the key for success of conservation agriculture. But what we have seen, my experience in South Asia and also from North Africa, where is most of the area has been mechanized, and then service provision model is working there. But what is happening is most of the service providers are very encouraged to go on conventional tillage because they have more opportunity for getting a business. But while we impose a no tillage or conservation agriculture, they are somehow kind of reluctant. And definitely some project is supporting for giving incentive, but how long it can be sustained. So I will have to have experience or suggestion that how we can keep this more sustainable to keeping those service provider is like a more change the mindset and also tackling on the business so that they don't lose their business is tilling 3 to 4 times and which is avoiding only one pass under no tillage system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think the last question on how do we keep the whole system sustainable and keep everyone engaged. Can anyone take it? Thank you, Dr. Govers.
I think it's an excellent question, and thanks for the different questions. To quickly respond, how can we make business entrepreneurship to sustain, right? So I think what those projects try to do is to be a factor of de-risking. But de-risking is very different than being a factor of, I don't know, subsidizing or incentivizing towards a level that it makes no sense. So the test of making it happen towards the future is probably in doing the right de-risking by some of those projects. And once those projects stop, there needs to be a deliberate decision who's taking over that de-risking if we are not yet at the curve where the business itself has taken care of it. Yeah, so there's like a period where you may be ready to take extra risk as a startup business. So if that is not the end of the project, there need to be other financial mechanisms or other mechanisms to keep de-risking. But that needs to be a very deliberate built-in mechanism. I think on the co-construction side, as you were mentioning, can we make sure that there's on the continent, it's about co-construction. It's not about importing solutions, innovations from anywhere else. The biggest innovation are simply stacking together innovations and make them work for the context where they're in. That does require educational systems that support that piece of innovation, which is an innovation, which is the knowledge on how to repackage innovation, redesign innovations based on innovations from somewhere else. So I think that that educational piece to do the co-construction, to do the co-creation, or to do the creation based on innovations that are available is an important element of education in any system we should expect.
Thank you. I think you have also touched on the comment that came from yeah. So thank you very much for that. Do you want to say something, Said, in terms of how do we keep the pipeline?
Yes, I would like to contribute to the question asked on from the regenerative agriculture on how to break cultures and get community participations. And what I can say, even decades-long traditions and cultures can be transformed, they can be changed. What is important is the benefits of the innovations being introduced must be demonstrated. They must be proven to be profitable. And once that happens, that they're not socially disadvantaging some groups. When that happens, even negative traditions can be changed and whole communities can be engaged. And I think that's the question we have been trying to see, that instead of working with groups in communities, let us see how we can change approaches so that we work with communities, so that people don't see a new innovation as belonging to only groups, but rather see how that can diffuse to at least 3/4 of a community. And that way, once the benefits are proven, communities can change and transform.
Thank you, Saidi. Thank you, Dr. Kovas, for your response. I think we'll end it there in terms of questions. I just want to say a few points as a way of closing. I think it's clear that the African continent has decided to talk about industrialization, and industrialization that is driven by agriculture. And it is quite amazing that there is not much investment in mechanizing that agriculture that is supposed to feed the industries. It's an irony that needs to be addressed, and it is the African governments that needs to think about it and change. They have subsidy programs for seed, they have subsidy program for fertilizer, there's a huge agenda on soil health and fertilizer, but what we have just heard from these speakers, that is, you can try to drive those, but without mechanization, you will not get anywhere. You still have challenges, and you still have a lot of inefficiencies in the system that can be addressed by conservation agriculture and mechanization. We already know that there is a framework at the continental level. There is a framework that has been elaborated by many speakers here. But what we want to see going forward is a lot more happening at the sub-regional and national level, where this framework is translated into actions that are going to make a difference in terms of the adoption of sustainable agriculture mechanization. This is what I think needs to be done, and it needs to be done urgently. So it will require a bit of advocacy, it will require data, it will require evidence that we need to take to those people who matter, the policymakers, the decision makers, the government officials sitting in those posts where they make decisions about financing. This is an urgent matter that we need to see how we can do the advocacy, the awareness raising, the capacity building to reach all the levels that are necessary. And we're going to require partnerships that are not usual, that are usual, that are innovative, that will make us do all the things that need to be done to make sure that SAM is benefiting this farmer in Africa, especially the smallholder farmer. It will require government, it will require private sector, it will require institutions that are national, regional, international, global institutions to come together, research the players that are here on the stage. I think the commitment is there. We need to work together more and make sure that we deliver some to the people of Africa. Or maybe, should we not be talking about a regional center specifically looking at mechanization, pushing the mechanization agenda for Africa so that it brings all the knowledge, all the technologies, all the financial muscles that are there to the fore and make sure that the adoption of some is making a difference on the smallholder farmers of Africa. This is something that probably could change the game for Africa. A center that is specifically focusing on mechanizing. All the other continents where mechanization is high, productivity went up and production went up, food insecurity reduced. The continents that are mechanized, the efficiencies are there to see. We need to look at it and see how we can take the agenda in Africa. I would like to say as a parting shot that the FAO count on us to be a partner in this. We would like to work with all the partners so that we make sure there is the adoption of conservation agriculture that is driven by mechanization. We would like to see, as FAO, we would like to see the agri-food systems being inclusive, efficient, resilient, and sustainable, so that we have better production, better nutrition, better environment, and a better life for all of us, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for staying on.